Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Parkitect. Today we're playing through scenario number 2. This is Chanute Airfield, and we are going to do our first time lapse with this video. So the last time around, we had streamed scenario number 1, or at least the first one after the tutorial, and played that one out, and then afterwards filled out the rest of the little park space that we had to work with. That was Maple Meadows. But now this time we have Chanute Airfield, and as you can see, spoiler here, I've already completed it, but now here we're going to record the video for it. Now, I did a poll after I posted the first one as to how people would like to see this shown, and the overwhelming majority said that they'd like to see a time lapse with just some audio recording over top of it. So what we decided to do is do just that. So this is going to be a test, see what you guys think about it, and please leave me some feedback on it, if it worked, if it didn't, whatever you think, and we'll see how it goes. So here's the scenario. The scenario goals, you can see right here, we had to have 250 people in our park, and as an optional goal we had to get 400 park tickets. So 400 kind of all time. The guests could leave, but they still counted towards that goal. And then do it all by year 2 was the optional goal. So you can see it's kind of a long, narrow stretch here. You can see some purchasable land up top where that sort of wood fence is. But we were going to try and do it without that. We did buy a little bit later on in the scenario just to kind of help us get around some stuff. We have some existing stuff here, like this little service area, and then our existing building here, which we can't demolish, so neither of these buildings can we touch. This kind of reminds me of Whispering Cliffs in RCT2, where you had just a long, narrow plot to build in. But we're going to take our different approach right here. So let's jump into the time lapse and take a look. So we've got some decent ride options to start with, but not too much. A lot of shops and stalls. We have this plain flat ride, which of course, being an airport, we're gonna absolutely do this. I tried to, as best as possible, do more airport type themed stuff. So we're gonna try for that. Now I had already built this Wild Mouse ahead of time. This is a recreation of the mock classic Wild Mouse, the port, I think compact mobile model. I buried some pathway there to get rid of the supports in the middle. I was going to try some custom supports, but none of the pieces in the base really kind of worked for me. So I said, well, we'll pass on that for now. But at least I wanted to get rid of the larger kind of grouping in there. So that's what we did. And then we're setting up a couple of these stalls here. This one came with the customizable stall where it doesn't have the actual kind of RCT style look to it. Where it looks like the food that it sells. So these I thought were a little bit cleaner since we were making them go right out onto the pathway. So we'll kind of do that and then kind of work on some buildings here. One of the fun things that I like about Parkitect so far is just some of the major gameplay differences from RCT. So the decoration rating is one of those, and also the necessity to block backstage areas, like some of these footpaths from employee areas and then back areas and things. So that's kind of a fun little challenge to consider, and some realistic kind of fun stuff in there too. So this first building, I'm kind of trying to riff a little bit off of the terminal building here, but also looking at just kind of airport style building. So I looked up I think I googled airport architecture, and I was looking at sort of the terminal style buildings and things like that. So you saw a lot of glass, a lot of metal, a lot of these sort of kind of modern touches with the overhangs and things like that. And granted, most of those were terminal buildings, not kind of out here wherever I guess we are, but that's neither here nor there. We can still copy that same sort of architecture. So we did that, and then I'm using the base shapes here to get us some nice columns and give these things a color. I thought I would go ahead and pull the yellow off of the plane that's sitting on the front entry, so we're going to do that, and then drop some flags up here. Chat voted on the flag colors while we were doing the stream, so we picked blue, yellow, and pink, I think, were the three colors. So fine with me. Actually kind of matches the plane ride there reasonably well. And then building with the topiary pieces and then some of the other like landscape shapes and things like that. Landscaping is another fun feature in this game because you can really have a lot of fun with going off grid and things like that. So I did enjoy that quite a bit. We're changing out some of the fences here around the ride. So that's another cool feature, that you can actually change the fences that surround the flat rides, and then also you can change the pavement base underneath of the flat ride based on whatever the first pavement tile is outside your exit for the ride, which I think is kind of cool. So we're still just kind of moving along here with our entrance area, just trying to get all this pulled together. I'm building in pause mode because I want to get all this down. Since we're trying to do this year 2 goal, I want to make sure that I get as much down as I can. And we start with a hefty amount of money, so I'm not real worried about having to make up some money. So right now we're just going to kind of build from the outset and get what we need to do until we need to open it, and then we'll go from there. So trying to build out a little bit. Now, one of the things that I wanted to do here is keep a little bit of this runway as sort of an homage to the theme. I mean, the idea is you're taking over this abandoned airport. So I thought, well, why not keep a little strip of runway there just to give us some kind of context of where it was. So we'll do a little bit of theming there. Now here I'm trying to figure out what to do for this station because I want to at least keep doing little bits of differences with the architecture. Unfortunately, the tracks above the station are a little too close together to do individual bits and pieces. I kind of wanted the brake run there on the second level to be able to go through kind of an enclosed space, but it really didn't quite work out as far as that goes. So we eventually abandoned that, and then I changed up to this sort of cleaner concrete tile look, a little bit more kind of cool gray and everything else. Also darkening up those pathways there because I found that pathway was really close to the rock and the pavement land texture, and it ended up blending into the runway. So we wanted to kind of avoid that just a little bit and get get some differentiation in there, and so you could actually see the pathway because it was kind of easy to lose it in the visual of everything. So I thought I'd use these frame pieces and then also overlay glass inside of them because it just kind of gave it that nice industrial look and feel to it. And then on the back side here we're looking at these the larger hangar roof pieces. So that was one of the sets that we had, kind of what they used to build the maintenance area initially, and then also the kind of hangar walls. You get that metal texture, which was kind of nice. So I thought we'll play with some of that, and of course our border pieces and everything, which are almost sort of staples. I try and do a little bit to avoid the basically build a box and then just cover the thing in border shapes, but in some cases that's the best option, and it looks the best. So here we're using those big pieces, and thankfully we've got the edge pieces in there. And the problem lies when you come out the backside with the pathway there, so I was trying to figure out what we're going to do there. So in this case we built a little tower here and sort of this control tower of sorts. Now in the main building that you start the game with, there's already a control tower there, but you know, we can theme it. There doesn't have to be just one, so it's okay theming the suspension of disbelief. So we're gonna suspend our disbelief that this airport has more than one control tower, and actually we'll see as we go through here a little later, there will be more than just that one. So anyway, a little bit of landscape here, continuing along, painting some of the grass in here. I more or less tried to keep the runway concrete texture sort of there the whole time, but in some cases I wanted to go ahead and change it to the grass just to give ourselves the ability to plant stuff there, because I didn't want to put a landscape feature onto I guess it would be concrete or rock texture there. So I'm pretty happy with how this building turned out. kind of a little bit non-standard as far as I'm not carrying the hanger wall piece or roof piece, I guess, over onto the front. We're doing more of this like kind of glass kind of entry feature sort of thing, sort of like a sunroom. And the bonus feature of that is that you can actually see the station inside, so you can watch the guests come in and load and all that kind of fun stuff. I'm doing a little bit to block off the maintenance area there with that big wood fence, and then I'm going to place a jumper ride over on this side as well. And here's kind of where I decided to use that concrete path for the queue, and then the brick path for the main general path. You can do both the same, but I wanted to at least offer a little bit of difference in there. So I'll start as far as that goes. Now here, just as far as a little realistic detail, I wanted to add a transfer track. Now granted, it's not a very big one for a ride that has like 8 vehicles, but it's a start, and I do want to try and keep this kind of thing up in the scenarios that we're going to do, just to add those realistic touches. As you know from this channel, if you've watched any of my videos, realism is kind of what I'm out here to do and teach. So we're learning how to do that kind of thing pretty easily. So we're gonna keep that up. So you can see here as we go through and continue to build on this, we're just making a little kind of hut building here on the front, which works just fine. It's entirely scenery, so it really does nothing for us except for just being scenery elements, but that's totally fine. Surprised at how well those doors fit in that space. I'm sure they're sized to do that, but kind of work well. I know we're going to put a little davit arm here, and the davit arm is used to basically pull the coaster car on or off of the track for annual maintenance, things like that. When you take it off of the track for the winter. All right, so now we have our little building here, and guests are kind of none the wiser that this is a little storage maintenance building for the coaster. And it gives us some more architecture just to consider for the space. So we're going through with double pathways on this one. The first scenario that we played, if you watched the stream archive for that one, we went with single paths, but for this I'm going a little more realistic, a little wider paths, and just based on the shaping of this this whole scenario, we really there's not a whole lot of variety that we're going to do with these pathways. It's kind of one long shot all the way down, and then flat rides or coasters on either side. We're going to do a little bit to try and vary that, but there's not so much you can do. Put a little information booth here, covered in some scenery. Thankfully, the little information sign above kind of popped up, which is cool. You can see I plopped down those planes there as my little static runway pieces, which I thought was kind of a nice touch. So we colored them red and yellow. And just trying to carry through all the things. We have lights, we have benches, we have trash cans, trying to get sort of a regular approach to those, make sure that we're going through. And then one more flat ride here to kind of get us rolling. This game, it seems, is very focused on getting exactly the right kind of flat rides down. So it seems like coasters and then sort of thrilling flat rides do the most as far as bringing in money. So you really can't go heavy with the gentle rides to begin with if you want to have any kind of semblance of profitability in the beginning. So you got to be real careful at the start what rides you're putting down just to make sure that you get it right. So we're looking at that. And the other thing that's real important on these kind of things is rain protection, because once it rains, the guests will leave the queues and not ride various rides unless they're under cover. So in a little bit here, we're going to put a cover over top of the jumper ride on the side. We're going to drop this Ferris wheel first just to give us kind of a critical max worth of stuff. So here's ride number 5, I suppose. we started out with 3 options for coasters. There was the junior coaster, there was the kids coaster, which is like the little miler ride, then there was the Wild Mouse. And I figured that was the biggest and best of them to start, so we'll begin with that one. But we'll come back a little bit later and build a junior coaster, just to have a little bit of variety in there. But I wanted to start with the Wild Mouse anyway. So here's that cover I was saying for the jumper. So this will allow the ride to still remain busy when it's raining, using the various pieces here for the hanger set. I don't know if this is going to show up in future scenarios or not, but it's relatively convenient for some of these bits and pieces. I do kind of wish those supports and the X's and everything were on the grid rather than just slightly inwards to them, so they're sort of customized to the various shape that they are. If they weren't, it would allow us to do those Wild Mouse supports without a problem, but they were just slightly off grid enough that it just didn't quite work out. Put a little viewing area there, same thing over there at the plane ride. So we're doing pretty well at this point. Here I have a cluster of a time trying to get the underground trash chute and delivery mechanism set up quite right, because I forgot that I buried all those pathways underneath the Wild Mouse, so it just wasn't connecting quite right. So I thought I had done it, but it hadn't, so we're having some trouble here. And eventually we just go around the whole thing, and then those stay there until I remember to delete them later on. But the depot is kind of nice in the fact that you've got this other game mechanic that, coming from RCT, you're not really used to, is that the stalls all have to get their materials and ingredients delivered to them. So like the burger stall needs burgers and fries delivered to it in boxes. You can put those depots down throughout the park and connect them by the little pneumatic chutes, I guess, or whatever they are. And then you assign shops to that particular depot, and then the haulers just have to go a shorter distance. So there's some just logistical considerations that you've got to make when doing this, which I really like. I think that's a fun extra to think about, and it's certainly some realism bits and pieces there as well. So here's our next piece of architecture. This is still trying to look after those sort of terminal type buildings. You've got this really great kind of wavy entrance. A lot of Chinese railroad stations now are kind of this sort of way, these real big sweeping curves and everything. I know Guangzhou main station has this huge curved roof and everything. It's super impressive. Here, a little less so. It's a smaller scale, but we're going to do some overhangs. We're going to bring back those glass pieces, and then this building, we're going to drop in a couple of these dessert stalls. I think it was cotton candy, hot drinks, and mini donuts. And then you can see this is that depot building we were just talking about. That's going to get dropped in there. And then we're also going to drop in a staff building, which is used for just kind of rest and recuperation because the staff get tired, which is another kind of fun mechanism that you really have to think through as far as your PEEP and game management goes. So there's our staff building. We're having some throw up and vandals and other things. The vandals mechanic in this is kind of interesting too. If your guests get bored enough with the ride selection, or a group of vandals just comes into your park, they can kind of wreak havoc on what all is going in there, and it's not too great. So you can have security guards take care of it, but sometimes that takes a little longer. So it's easier just to go find them and ban them yourself from the park. But they come pretty frequently in some cases, and I find it a little bit maybe overpowered perhaps that you spend a lot of your time doing that more than really just managing your park. But what we did here is take out a loan to get ourselves a wooden coaster. So we were profitable before, but we want to keep on moving, and we still want to look for that goal of year 2 for our goals. So here I'm going to build an out and back coaster, which I did that in the first scenario also. So I guess we're doing a little bit of a rehash, but the reason being is it's easy to build, it doesn't take up a ton of space, and I don't have to really think about it so hard. So like twister coasters, I feel like require just a little bit more layout thought and things like that. Whereas an out and back coaster is relatively easy to take care of. You can kind of just build it on autopilot, which is what we're doing. So we're going to use the 3-bench PTC trains, and we're going to go through here and just build a little bit of build this kind of out and back with a curve in it. Here I am trying to find out how you build or how you buy land. So thankfully someone in chat pointed out that it's under the land movement tab, which makes somewhat sense. And now we're kind of skirting down below, making sure we have enough speed to kind of cross over here and then head on home. Really, I do love the coaster building mechanics in this game. They're still somewhat limited, not compared to like Planet Coaster or New Element and things like, or New Element, No Limits. But I really wouldn't expect anything more of that. That's a kind of this sort of game as it is on a grid makes sense. So it works pretty well, I'd say. Alright, and then we're going to use this S-bend, which we can still bank to go home. In RCT, I tell you, as coaster building goes, to never ever ever use the S-bend. But in this game, since you can bank it a little bit and you can increase the size of it, it makes sense. We're good with that. So here I'm trying to figure out how to get the queue across. Because we're just slightly below the level point, I can't, or at least on the front side there, I can't just go down a 1, I'd have to go down 2, which I didn't want to do. So we're going to do this around the back side here, dip down, and then come across and connect our pathway over. Just kind of extending stuff down even further. And then we're going to jack up our price. You can charge like 10, 12 bucks for this kind of thing, which is great. Also going for a little bit lighter color scheme this time around. Here too, we're going to add our transfer track for this one, which I think is a good feature again as well. Sliding transfer track, nothing special, pretty easy. And with that loan that I took out, that wooden coaster did not cost a ton of money, so I can finish up some of the architecture and other buildings here that we're looking at. We're not very far away from the goal. We've got 230 guests here, so it's going to be pretty easy for us to hit that here once we unpause. But then too, we want to go for our 400 guest tickets also. So there's the scenario goal achieved in year 1, June of year 1, so well in front of the timeline, which is good news. But again, more to be seen with the 400 ticket sales. So that's still something we want to consider as we go along. Trying to place plenty of seating and lights and things like that. The seating is always one of the more important things, I feel like, just to make sure that the guests can rest. It seems like the peeps in Parkitect get more tired more quickly than, say, RCT peeps. So we want to cater to those needs as well. Here we're finally putting some trim and some other details onto that building, and just kind of going around and starting up for the coaster station, which is a relatively simple one, not a whole lot to it. We are using the hanger pieces kind of in full this time around. And doing a little bit, we're going to leave a space on top just so that we can make it a little more interesting. The scenery building in this game is nice and easy, at least in the vanilla kind of base game stuff, because there are just so many just big pieces that fit all the holes. So you have these certain curves for this hangar roof, but then you have the wall pieces that fit right in, and it's just very easy to finish out and build a space. So it doesn't end up coming in supremely detailed, but at the same time it still looks pretty good. Alright, so we'll do a scrambler here, add some more flat rides in. At this point I was also trying to research some more stuff just to see what we would get. We're kind of building ourselves out of thrill rides and coasters. Because at the time I really wasn't feeling building a junior coaster, really wasn't feeling building the miler either. So here's a quick POV of the coaster, just in 7 times speed, looking at some of that airtime and everything else. I mean, the stats were fine on the ride. I don't know how hard it is to get bad stats on a ride, but I didn't really seem to have any trouble on this one. trying to do some vandal hunting. Kind of see, so you try and go around and look for all the guests that have a bandana and the baseball hat on backwards, and those are the ones that you need to find out on. So here we are, just using the viewfinder, which is really cool. These different lenses that the game offers, so you can basically search for. In this case, I'm looking for vandalism, which highlights red. You can also use the decoration tab, which really highlights things bright red when there are issues with it. So it's nice and easy to find stuff with. And this is kind of the way for me to go, is just kind of zoom out, wait till I see some red, and then zoom in and get the vandals. We hired a few more staff there just to take care of things. I'm trying to use a variety of the scenery pieces each time around, just as far as a flexible understanding of how you do these kinds of pieces go. Really, the goal of me playing through these scenarios is to remember how to operate this game, because it's been a while, for one, and two, just get a good feel and handle on how to use all the variety of scenery pieces and how best to take care of those. Because once I get through the scenarios and start building in the mods and things like that and custom stuff, then it's sort of a free-for-all. But I want to at least know how to use the base game stuff before we get too far along. Here we are on the Vandal Hunt again, which is why I said I thought this was sort of overpowered, because there's just so much time is spent kind of hunting these guys when you're playing this just as a in regular speed. And I still find I do most of my building in pause mode. So we put a line of the Steve trees, and then doing some overlay of the plants and everything, which is again building off grid, or at least snapping to the grid in different spots. So in that one I kind of snapped to the quarter tile and then the center tile, so I got some kind of nice overlapping. Here we were trying to figure out what the best way to encompass the fence is. So the park perimeter fence doesn't go away, but you can encompass it and stuff. So we did that with this wood fence, and then put some vines on it to just smooth out that overall look. There's theming bits and pieces all around, nice and easy. And then more trim here. So finish out this building. Like I said before, we're on such a narrow plot of land that we really want to make sure we're doing some variety of movement within these pathways, so it's not just two path tiles just straight all the way down. I mean, it kind of is, but we're kind of jogging it to one side, and in some cases we're putting rides in the way and moving it to the other side, just to make sure we can get that just right. Here I thought it would be a nice little touch to add the little glowing ball light into our little diorama of the airport as runway lights. I thought that could be kind of a nice touch. And then just some more decor and some decoration and things like that. Now, I haven't gone through this park and added a lot of lighting. I know I spent some more time doing that in the first scenario, so I wasn't necessarily going to go back and spend a ton of time on that here. But I did want to go ahead, at least build out the park a little bit and get to a point where I'm happy with it. So we're probably not going to do that the whole go around as far as future scenarios go, because some of these are going to start to get pretty big as far as the space to build in goes. So we're going to kind of build our park until we're happy with it and then leave it at that, rather than filling up all the space. But today in this one, we're going to fill up most of the space without buying the new or the land that you can buy. We already bought that one little strip for the wooden coaster. We're going to do a little bit more later on, just from a niceness of landscaping standpoint. So I hadn't ended up finishing this one. I still had that entrance and the exit portion to sort out as I was kind of working through some different options. So again, the best choice was really just to kind of stick this horizontal out from the curve and just kind of do it that way. Also use those pillars throughout, add some flags to it, and call it a day. Now, we had started researching thrill rides again because I figured that was going to be the best selection of stuff. So first one here is a Topple Tower, which I really love that they included this in the game. There's some kind of odd choices with this, and I guess it's so they don't have to like bury the mechanism, but the little spiral ramp up to the tower is a little strange, perhaps, because none of the real ones had that so much. But it's still interesting, and you can kind of see the mechanism going there with the big counterweight swinging back and forth. So I can understand why they would have to raise it up if the game mechanics don't let them kind of build downwards underneath the ride itself there. But I think it's interesting that they included that ride because it was such a short-lived actual ride in real life. So it's a Huss ride, and there was a couple of pretty kind of famous failures of it as far as just unreliability and things like that. So Dollywood built one called Topple Tower, and it was themed to sort of a big kind of sharpened to a point wood log, and then it kind of tilted down towards various scenic sets, which is a pretty cool thing, but it just was super unreliable, and honestly it wasn't a super exciting ride. I did get to ride it on a couple occasions. So they took it out after not a huge many seasons, and then a bunch of parks followed as well. There's only one operating now at Bellewaerde Park in Belgium, so it's just the final one there. I think I've seen 4 of them, ridden one of them. All the other ones were closed, so it kind of says something there. But interesting concept, more maybe for paper than for actual use, but nonetheless, we are going to build some just kind of rocks and scenic pieces and things like that here, and some of these little topiary trees. Like I said with the Dollywood one, what was cool about the Topple Tower is how it tilted down towards various like show sets. Like in one case it was down towards some fountains, in another case it was down towards like a big spinning saw blade, stuff like that. So in the future, if I did use one of those in sandbox mode, I think I would want to go back through and try and build something more unique on it. So something to think about then. But for this one, it was just, let's get it in, let's get it themed, and let's keep on moving. Because I really wasn't necessarily feeling the need to build out this whole thing, but I kind of committed to it. So we're going to build another little architecture, or a little piece of architecture here. Again, trying to keep the form a little bit varied, but also have some kind of level of similarity between everything. So color-wise, texture-wise, material-wise, we're going to keep all that the same and change up the form a little bit. So we got our little Quonset hut type hangar here with a slope section off the back that's going to be our maintenance area, and another one of those depots, and then just 5 different shops and stalls and things like that to give the guests something to eat. So we're not too far from the front gate, but we are far enough that it's probably worth doing so nobody has to walk too far. Not super detailed either, it doesn't need to be. It's just fine. Paint those glass walls yellow, keep that trope sort of the same. And then I also wanted to do a little building here on the side for another restroom. So we'll plop that guy in. I said this on the RCT stream the other day, but restrooms are something that I almost always forget to build in my games, and a lot of times I'm finishing up parks and go, oh shoot, there's only like 1 restroom in this park, and then you got to go back and add some in. So it was a conscious effort to make sure that there was at least a restroom in kind of a couple of different spots here, at least at sort of both ends and in the middle, which we did kind of sneakily so put a restroom inside the front gate building, the one that you can't destroy, but there's nothing that says you can't build things inside of it, so that's what we did. And I set a space there for the hauler to occupy, so that way those would get restocked quickly, so that was easy enough. Okay, so next flat ride, we're jumping back to the other side. We're going to do one of these gyro towers. I thought it was interesting, the seats on this one are awfully spread out. It looks like it's meant to be an Intamin gyro tower, but you look at something like the Topple Tower, which has a really good kind of realistic level of seats all close together and everything. And then this one's got a bunch of these seats kind of separated from each other. So I'm not quite sure what this was based off of. If it was based off of a different one perhaps, or it was just more tailored to the game itself. But I just thought that was kind of funny that that the Topple Tower kind of had the kind of realistic details of the seating done a little nicer than the Drop Tower did. So there was a little more that we forgot on the coaster station, so we're going to go ahead and finish that, keep that nice and easy, and take care of it. Alright, so now I figure it's time for another coaster, so we're going to do the junior coaster here, and not a huge layout, but we want to do something that's just going to get us finished. One of the downsides of this coaster builder compared to RCTs perhaps is that you can only build it out from the front. You can only build starting from the station. So you can kind of see I built a little spur there to start to put the brake run in, because I knew I wanted this sort of diagonal brake run element and crossing through this compact layout. So we started there and kind of built that from the beginning, so that it was already there when we didn't block it with other track later. This makes coaster building a little more challenging in my opinion, at least compared to being able to be a little more flexible. I know in RCT a lot of times I like to start with the element that I'm going to use, or like let's say I want a loop right next to a pathway or something. I might start with that loop and then build backwards up my first hill or something like that just to get the space right. You can't do that here, so it's forces you to be a little more creative. And then here we go, not a huge layout, but we're gonna come in here and wrap this thing up. So we got this sort of helix drop, turn around over top of the station, then one more turn around and into these diagonal brakes. Nice shout out for the coaster builder there too, that you can use diagonal brakes and inclined brakes, both in this instance, which I love. We're going to go for this kind of light blue thing, some sort of plane flight, whatever theme. Tenuous at best. I know we said we wanted to do airplane airport theming, and we're pretty darn limited on all of that. So kind of it is what it is. We have a couple options. So here we carried over our path accoutrement and continued that for the lights and the benches and the trash cans and all that. And now we're going to jump into the station itself. This is a real simple station because you'll notice with that curve overhead I don't have a whole lot of space. I thought about trying to incorporate like a tunnel through the building on that, but there just was no good way to frame that easily to do that, so we didn't. We just kind of did this glass frame station, so probably like a sauna in there. It's a little bit like a greenhouse. Carried this kind of dark black brick through, and then a couple of these different covers throughout. Noticing too that the coaster station itself has these like steps all the way down on the side. Now you load from that one loading platform booth there with the red booth, but the steps are still there, so I don't know if it's just like a visual thing that doesn't necessarily do realism, but it's still there. So we kind of had to put a platform down, even though we couldn't cover it because we didn't have the clearance for it. So not our finest realism moment there, but it's something to think about next time when we do some more coasters. So nice open air station, pretty simple, pretty straightforward, but done. And now here, I said earlier we were going to build a couple of control type towers. Here's another one. This is a big one. So I wanted to use those specific wall pieces there where it's kind of a corner wall that's got the end chamfered out. Just to kind of see how that would look. I kind of wish there was an option for that fit on like a 1x1 tile, but this will work to start. So we're on a 2x2. Thought I would do the kind of candy cane type or checkerboard striping on this one. Do some similar details and everything. Put a windsock on top. And then there is the technological theming that's got these like spires and little components and things like that that we're going to use for antenna and all that kind of fun stuff. So a few lights, few windows, things like that. Keep it simple, keep it pretty straightforward, and then also come back through and just do landscaping. Lots and lots of trees. Not a whole lot of options there, but we're going to use a few of them. For a brief moment, I tried to put in a transfer track and trying to think about what the best option would be for that, but without some zero clearancing, I couldn't do it. I couldn't fit it how I wanted to, so we're just going to abandon it for this one, even though it does run 2 trains and we should do it. I didn't quite think of the best way to do it, so we're going to leave it alone. Put another plane in there for theming. We only have that one plane variety, so it's we're getting the mileage out of it. Alright, so we're going to finish up this side, and I could have probably kept going with flat rides and things like that, but I hadn't built a car ride yet, and I thought this might be a decent place to start. So we're going to do this car ride that takes up kind of the rest of the space here. Keeping it flat, we can go up, and actually there's some cool features on car rides like this in this game where you can do upwards helixes, you can do climbs, drops, turns, things throughout like that, which are pretty cool, and it makes it a lot more flexible, especially the diagonals and things like that. It just looks so much more smooth. Same with the go-karts in this game, which we haven't quite done yet, but we will do at some point here. But nice detailing and a nice feature compared to what I'm used to with the game. As far as I could tell, these were the only kind of cars that we had for it, the antique cars, but that was fine. No real reason to be concerned about that, or at least want to change it, I suppose. At this point, I just kind of wanted to build anything in the place. Do a little bit of detailing over here, fence-wise and all that, before we get back to the building on this. I was kind of trying to figure out what exactly I'm doing for the building here in general, so in the meantime, I'm kind of stalling by building all of this decoration and theming. And I feel like these car rides, this is sort of your standard trope that you go to for car rides, is just to say, okay, we're going to do a kind of big nature trail. And if you watch the actually, I don't think I put it in the video last time, but I did build out the first scenario with one of those calm river rides with the circular boats. And really the whole purpose of those, at least the ones that I did in Europe, were basically it's a river ride through a garden, and pretty simple, pretty straightforward. And we're going to apply the same technique here, just with a nice manicured landscape, using some fencing, using some rocks, some water features, and that's all pretty much it. So it's straightforward enough. We weren't going to spend too much time doing theming. We could do some billboards and stuff with the signage, which I haven't really messed with in this game just yet, but for now we're going to stick with that. And then architecture-wise, it's felt rustic enough, so we went with this sort of wood slat wall panels and things like that. Pretty simple station, absolutely nothing to do with an airport, which definitely was not quite what I was thinking initially, but it just so happened that that's what got built. And we'll actually notice that this carries on to the other thing that we're still to build. So maybe not the best choice on that, at least from a theming standpoint, but it was a pleasant looking building. It didn't do anything too special. The architecture was fine, nothing groundbreaking, but it got us through the day. Not the most popular of rides, but I guess I wouldn't expect it to be as sort of a gentle ride. I was surprised the plane ride up at the front ended up having a ton of guests pretty much the entire time, and that was surprising, being a gentle ride itself. We put dormers there briefly, but they didn't quite work out because I didn't have them at the elevation that could take a window panel just right. So he said, well, we'll just leave that as it is. Put some of our fencing down. We're going to change up to that post and rope. I like this kind of feature for water. So putting the actual water in some kind of a depression in the landscape and then putting a fountain on top of it and some of the basic shapes, it makes for a slightly fancier fountain, I feel like. I've seen a couple of people do that elsewhere. More theming, including a giant water tower for some reason. I wanted to see if those crates and cones could be cloned and used elsewhere, but they can't. So that kind of solves it there. So not a huge variety of stuff beyond just the plants that we're doing here. So not a whole lot, but it was enough to take care of it. Alright, so now we're going to be on to our very last ride. So I figured I might as well build a log flume in this space and see what we can do with it. So we're going to use the cool feature that these rides have in that you can kind of partially bury them in the ground without having a tunnel created. And the real benefit of that is just to have a more realistic look to those flumes. That's really how a lot of flumes are built, sort of like in ground. And really convenient, really nice idea. You can do the same with water too, which is just perfect. So these are some of the best mechanics in Parkitect, in my opinion, as far as gameplay goes. So we're going to do a 2 lift hill, sort of these couple of mid drops on this one. And just winding around, no real particular surprises there. And lift underneath the coaster and drop underneath the coaster, kind of leveling out inside the water here. Then circling around back to the station. So pretty straightforward, pretty easy, but it'll work. So we'll go ahead and test that while we build in our exit path, which actually ends up becoming the entrance path as well, over top of the drop. So a little further away and not quite the splash you're going to get from like a splash boats. So you're probably pretty safe from getting soaked, but it's a cool vantage point as well. Great way to see the coaster kind of or the flume popping through the coaster there and having a nice big drop. So there's our entrance that comes off of the side here. And I was trying for a little bit to figure out what happens for this station. So in the meantime, once again, I'm stalling by building plants. You can see that section of pathway, or not pathway, of land that I had to buy in order to fit this pond in. I could have fit it probably, but it would have been a little bit of a tight fit, so I just went ahead and bought some extra land. I didn't end up using it just for landscaping, but it was enough to to kind of finish up that that setup. You can see it's been a long day. I'm yawning already. So here's where I sort of blanked. I put down these walls and then I said, well shoot, what do I do now? And I'm really not quite sure, so we're going to change some colors and stall for some other things and then figure out what's going to happen next. So eventually we'll figure some more theming. I didn't really want to change the landscape type here since it was still the concrete from the runway. So I dropped some rocks in there since I couldn't do plants based on that. So we'll stick with that. And then I said, all right, well, we're just going to jump into this and give this one a try. And then I chickened out. So I said, okay, well, instead we're going to build some other little buildings here. So this side needs a restroom. We unlocked a first aid station. That was good, and then we also have one of these little trash chutes. So I figured I'll take the architecture from that toilet building I did on the other side and kind of copy it 2 across on this side and do the arches. 1, 2, just like that. So again, new form, similar style, using awnings and other things that we've definitely used elsewhere in the game. But in a new way and a little bit of a new look. Also realized we had these restroom signs, so I thought, why not? We'll use those as well. Some flags in there. It's a festive bathroom for some reason. Alright, now I finally decided to man up and finish this station because it just had to get done. Really, at this point, it was just, alright, let's get done, whatever it takes to finish this thing up. So we're going to build this form, again, a pretty standard coaster slash track ride station where you've got a 3 by whatever length of the station plot, and then you're going to raise the center section up and put like a little clear story window thing in there. I'm going to use these wood poles because it feels, log flume, so we use some logs. Of course, it's just sort of the standard thing that you do with flumes, which I think that could be something to explore for later to try to do something a little bit different as far as theming of a log flume goes. But for now, we're going to stick with this. I used some of those metal frames that we had used elsewhere just to keep that consistency, and then fill it with glass and some other things, and then add a few of these corrugated metal roofs on the outside. Also one here to start out, and then we're going to do another one here a little later, right before the final lift hill. So call it a tunnel or something like that. And then I figured down on this side, we probably ought to do one more thing on this. So we added a staff building down here, a trash chute, and again, copying the same form, elongating it to fit our needs, and kind of sticking it in this last open space among all of the others. And then now you just got to get trees throughout and get this set up just right, connect that big tube, and go from there. So we are nearly done. Checking our decor, making sure we're good. So here we are. So we'll go back to our real time. And we've got the whole park here finished. Quite a lot of guests here, 730 guests throughout the whole thing. But pretty darn good, I would say, for this one. All started here with our little architecture and our wild mouse. So I did realize that I plopped that one down from a blueprint. It was something that I had built ahead of time and saved. I did that with the spinning coaster in the last scenario as well. Just because I like to sit and fiddle with coasters for a long time, and it doesn't necessarily make good streaming or just good building in general. I'm not really sure people want to watch that. Maybe they do. Let me know if you do, if you want to see that. But I did that off screen and worked just fine. I do kind of like how that car ride turned out, even though it's just sort of a kind of plonked on the ends there, just doing what it does. But not too bad. So full of architecture. I think we have a good consistency in architecture. We have a good selection of flat rides, of track rides, of everything else. So it looks pretty good to me. And we beat our scenario goals, including the optional ones, and unlocked 2 different ones to tackle for the next time. So I haven't quite decided which ones I'm going to do yet, but we're going to start to do Parkitect on Thursdays. We're going to stream that, and we'll get as far as we get, and then after that I'll either do more streams or kind of these time-lapse recordings again. So anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye now.